Hello, it's me. It's a little weird to see me back after I just posted a video a couple days ago, but a little bit of time on my hands, and I thought I'd make another little something. I was posting on Facebook, and I made a comment about Activision being one of the causes, if you will, behind the video game crash of 1983, and a few people were surprised that Activision's been around that long, so I thought I'd take the time to do a little video explaining the origins of the company and uh, what they've been doing all these years. Now, most people, when they hear Activision today, people that are maybe in their teens or 20s, just think of it as, the company that everybody kind of bashes for being money grubbing, and they just re-release games over and over again. And, they kill IPs, and they're more about making money than making games. The funny thing is about it is that that's kind of how they've been all their whole existence. Because how Activision actually got started was that they were publishing games for Atari 2600, and Atari at the time had a policy of not crediting the designers of games. Never got any recognition, didn't get any royalties, if you will. And a couple of the programmers went to Atari and tried to make an agreement where it would be like how on a music album the songwriters get credit, get a little bit of cut of the profit, something they can put on their resume. And Atari didn't want to do that. They didn't want to have their game designers start taking credit for their work and being able to use that to their own gain instead of just making games for Atari. So a group of developers quit, formed their own company in 1979 called Activision, and they became the main third-party publisher of Atari 2600 games back when that wasn't a common thing. In fact, Atari actually sued them, and the court case that was decided in Activision's favor is what created the legacy of third-party publishers that we see today, which is kind of ironic. The game systems now kind of trip over themselves to cater to third-party. I know the Wii kind of got bashed a lot for not having a lot of third-party games. When video games were a new thing, that was certainly the opposite of what the companies intended at the time. They did not want to give up control and fought really hard to not allow that. But Activision was the number one publisher of Atari 2600 games other than Atari themselves. And you can always know an Activision game because they have those interesting little color labels. And one Activision game for the Atari that I'm sure everybody knows would be Pitfall. Funny thing about this too, you see this here, it's not that this cartridge is dirty, is that the glue that Activision used for their labels for Atari games years later starts getting this weird kind of film to it. It's like the glue has some kind of reaction to the paper on the label or something. It's weird. You find this one too has it to a degree. Activision cartridges, when you find them nowadays, they all have this weird, dirty-looking haze to them. It's kind of a trait among the games of that vintage. A lot of Atari collectors joke about it, but it's a interesting thing. But yes, they were the first third-party developer, and their part of the video game crash is that because Atari had no control over the quality of third-party games, that kind of ushered in the era of shovelware. And because there was no quality control, there was just tons of games being produced, and there was no internet back then, and there's a couple of gaming magazines, but they weren't very widespread, so people were basically buying blind, based on how cool the box looked and word of mouth. And a lot of people ended up buying crappy games because they had nobody to warn them, basically. And that led to the video game crash. Basically, there was so much crap that people just stopped buying. There was no way to tell the good from the bad, and the market at the bottom just kind of fell out. And the famous burial in the desert that Atari did, that everybody claims was ET cartridges. They did actually bury stuff in the desert in New Mexico, but based on pretty much all the reports that were made at the time, it was actually broken consoles more than games. And if there were any games, it was probably Pac-Man cartridges, not ET, because Atari actually made 12 million cartridges of Pac-Man at the time when there was only 10 million 2600 consoles out there. So there's any cartridges buried in the desert, it's far, far more likely to be Pac-Man. An interesting historical tidbit for you. But anyway, back to Activision. Yes, they actually contributed to the famous crash by the games they produced. A lot of them were not that great. I mean, for every Pitfall and River Raid, there's tons of skiing and boxing and ice hockey, which were just as bland as the title suggests. And they also ushered in the era of shovelware when companies saw how much Activision was making being a third-party vendor. Then everybody hopped on, and that's how that train left the tracks. And through the years, that's pretty much what they've been doing. When you see Activision today taking a series of games and running it into the ground, or releasing game after game of the series and really kind of bleeding it dry instead of spending the time to make a quality game, they're really just doing what they've always done. They've just pushed out games and haven't ever really spent a lot of time focusing on the quality. It's not to say they've never made any good games, but it's probably safe to say that making good games has never been the primary focus. I mean, like any business, they want to make money, but I don't know, it seems like some of that money could probably be spent a little bit more toward quality control, or just trying to think of some other games to come up with instead of just rehashing on previous titles. I saw a lot on Twitter about their mobile division is releasing a version of Pitfall for Apple iOS systems, and I don't know. I've seen some Activision employees kind of upset of the reaction that people were saying, "Oh, you raped my childhood" and all that. Yeah, it's probably a little extreme, but if you've seen screenshots of this game, it's not really Pitfall. It's just a generic jungle quest game that they put the Pitfall name on, and I mean, I'm sure it's a decent game, but taking a game like that really has no connection to a classic game and just slapping the name on it, it kind of comes off like those Pac-Man side-scrolling adventure games they made in the mid-90s for like the Super Nintendo. They weren't bad games, but you call it something Pac-Man, you're putting the bar pretty high that has to live up to. And it's the same thing with this. If they would have called this Activision's Jungle Adventure game, people would probably say, hey, it's a pretty decent little game. But putting that name on it, you're setting expectations high. Can't really be surprised if people aren't happy with the results. But yeah, I thought I'd make a little brief history of one of the gaming industry's favorite companies to love and love to hate and hate to love, our friends at Activision. So, see you guys around. Yeah, I'll talk to you later.